The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Good evening and welcome to the Ask Your Lawyer show. My name is Esther Olasehinde of Liberty Law Solicitors and I'll be your host for today. On mic 3 I have with me Dean Garrett.
Hi everyone.
Thanks for joining me, Dean, for today. So today's topic will be about consumer rights and what protection you have as a customer, especially with this time of the year, loads of gift buying and sales and Boxing Day sales and New Year sales. So obviously there's going to be a lot of gifts in the house. And obviously you're going to want to know your rights because a lot of the time, sometimes you're not happy with a gift and you would like to return them. So today we're just going to have a brief overview of what rights that you have over the purchases. So, Dean, what law protects your consumer rights?
In the past, it used to be quite a confusing situation.
Mm-hmm.
You used to have the Sales of Goods Act and Services Act.
Mm-hmm.
That's all been complemented now under one singular act, which is called the Consumer Rights Act 2015.
Okay.
And that came in 2015.
Okay.
And it's now set out a new test and has given consumers a huge amount of power now and protection.
Okay. So with the other acts, I know there was a Sale of Good Act. What else was there? I think the UCTA, was it Unfair Terms in Consumer Contract Regulations? Has that completely replaced it, or is it like working together?
It's now repealed some of it. It certainly hasn't got rid of the Unfair Contract Terms Act, but certainly it's now complementing it. And for consumers, personal consumers, you will be really looking at the Consumer Rights Act 2015.
Okay. And just to make a point before we move on forward, just to let our listeners know that goods doesn't actually have to be something that's tangible in the sense that it's something you hold. It could be a service that you've received. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And another thing to bear in mind is in this world, we are now buying digital games on your PS3, Xbox. Yeah. It's music, all downloaded, music. And Consumer Rights Act now extends to digital content, which which no legislation covered beforehand.
Okay. And what are the new rules? I think there's a test. What's the test?
Yeah, there's 3 key principles here. And the first one is that when you buy a goods or services, it has to be of satisfactory quality, which we'll come on to.
Okay.
And the second criteria is it must be fit for purpose. And the third one is it must be described or relevant to the information given to you. And again, I'm happy to go into that and give you an example.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking, because this is a 2-part radio show, so after the break we will go into more details and examples, real life examples for our listeners to apply to everyday life. But just for now, Dean, if you could just give us some examples of what satisfactory quality is.
So it's the test really to apply is reasonable. Yes. So if you were to go into an expensive hi-fi shop and purchase yourself an expensive hi-fi, you would expect it to be of reasonable quality. It's a good item that might have cost £400 to £500. You expect it to last a long time. Equally, if you were to go into a Poundland shop or a bargain bucket type esque shop, those sort of quality products, you don't expect them to have the same longevity or the same use.
Yeah.
So it comes down to really satisfactory quality to match what you were buying, intended purchase, and also to be reflective in the purchase price.
Exactly. And just to add to that, just because the quality is not the same, so for example, if you buy, let's say, a watch, and the watch tells the time perfectly, but then you go swimming and it's not protected by water, what's the word? Water resistant. Sorry, apologies, not water resistant. If you've paid, maybe a lesser amount, it's not expected to do that. But just because the quality is not the same, it doesn't mean it should be faulty. Is that correct?
That's
so you
correct.
shouldn't expect it to explode or stop working.
No. And usually the assumption is there's the 6-month rule, which we really look at. Within the first 6 months, if there's a fault that's developed with the product, it's assumed to be already there when you had purchased it.
Okay.
After 6 months, the burden falls on you to prove that the fault wasn't there in the first place and it hasn't occurred through wear and tear.
So with wear and tear, could you just give us an example of what that could look like?
So again, if you take the classic example of maybe a car, you purchase a car, a brand new car, after 6 months, you expect it not to have issues, or any mechanical problems. But maybe a second-hand car that was purchased at, a few £100.
Yeah.
If you've done a lot of driving for wear and tear, you expect parts to maybe go on it or tires needing replacing.
Okay. And moving on to fit for purpose, any other examples we can give our listeners?
So fit for purpose is if you go into a store looking for example, looking for, let's say, a drill. I go into a hardware shop and I want to buy a drill set that will enable me to put up shelves. I speak to a salesperson who tells me, yes, this drill will do the job for you.
Yeah.
I take it home and I later find out actually it isn't a masonry drill. I cannot drill into the wall as I was told I could. It's not fit for purpose. There may not be anything wrong with the drill. It's suitable for everything else, like wood and that. But because it's not a masonry drill, it's not fit for purpose for what I intended to buy it for.
Yeah. And I think that really comes into practice with shopping online, because you read descriptions or you don't read it well enough, and then the product comes and it's 10 times smaller than you thought, or the colour's a bit off. So I think, just for our listeners to bear that in mind, that this may come into play a lot with online shopping. And in this day and age, a lot of purchases are done online. You find that not a lot of people are going to shops to buy their goods. So in regard, if someone isn't happy, what can they do going forward? I mean, I know the easiest way is to maybe go back to the shop and return it, but what rights do customers have under the Consumer Rights Act?
So within the first 30 days, with the exception of digital content, which we'll explain later, you can ask for an immediate refund. If a fault is developed or you're not happy with the goods that you have purchased, you can ask for an immediate refund. After 30 days, if a fault develops, the company who or the store that you've purchased your product will have the opportunity to offer a repair to the product. And if that doesn't work out, then they can give you a refund. But this is where it gets a bit more confusing, but it makes sense. If I was to buy, for example, a motor scooter, mobility scooter, and I've purchased it, and after 6 months, the battery, I note, is not lasting as long. I take it into the shop and they replace the battery.
Yeah.
But then after 6 months again, I notice the battery isn't lasting as long. Now, at that point, I would have bought that good under the understanding that I wouldn't need to replace the battery every 6 months. Or it wasn't sold to me under that description. Because you expect, something, a motor scooter, mobility scooter, it can cost quite a lot of money. So in a case scenario like that, the retailer who sold it to you will have the opportunity to, again, offer you the opportunity of having it replaced again, the battery, or to give me a refund, but to reflect the wear usage out of it. So I may not get the full refund because I've had a year's service out of it, years worth of use. But certainly I would be entitled to some refund.
Okay. And just to add to what Dean has said, all of these scenarios we're giving you are subject to its own circumstances. That's why I think this topic is quite, I wouldn't say difficult, but every scenario is dependent on the context and what's happened, what the product is, what the consumer expects from the product. So if you have any other ongoing issues, where can somebody go? Is there some sort of helplines or complaints that they can go forward to?
So the first port of call will always be to raise the complaint with the retailer itself. And, if you're outside the 30-day window of getting your immediate refund back, you'll have the option of a repair or a replacement. And that often will be at the choice of the retailer.
Yeah.
So, again, to give another example, if you buy a washing machine and the cost of repairing it outweighs the cost of a replacement, a retailer may just take the option to replace it. But if that repair cost is below the cost of replacement, the retailer will probably just seek to repair it. Okay? And the choice will be up to them. But if you're still remaining unsatisfied at that point or it's unresolved, once you've explored the issue with the the company and it still that hasn't resolved itself, there usually is a lot of alternative dispute resolution services out there, and a lot of these big retailers will subscribe to one of these ADRs, we call them, short-term alternative dispute. And certainly they're there to assist and to avoid the matter escalating or going any further.
Yeah, exactly.
If that still doesn't resolve, then the courts and the small claims courts always remain an option.
Okay. And just to our listeners that are tuning in, you can also go to Citizens Advice if you have any queries that you think it might not go that far to going to any sort of claims court. Go to your local Citizens Advice. They have a lot of helplines that they could direct you to. There's ombudsmen that you can make complaints against.
Yes, and that's an option that you should really explore, because practically speaking, if you were to go to the courts, there's going to be legal fees incurred and costs incurred if you're not successful. And also, if an item isn't high value, it's something to bear in mind that the amount of cost you're spending in getting an item refunded or replaced may actually may be outweighed by the cost of going to court. So going to your ombudsman, whether it's the financial services ombudsman or there's a whole a list of ombudsmans out there, depending on what circumstances you're looking at, what product you've bought or services you've bought, and that should definitely be your first port of call.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier, because we gave a list of issues and goods. So we gave an example that digital, and 21st century now, we are dealing with a lot of digital goods, downloads, music, podcasts, films, you name it. What now can we say about digital content?
So with digital content, once you've downloaded or you've purchased and downloaded your digital content, let's say a TV series you've purchased, you will not be entitled to a refund on that purchase.
Okay.
The reason being behind that and the logic behind that is if you purchased a series and you started watching it, you've already consumed it. Where your rights now extend to digital content is where, let's say, on that TV series, the last episode didn't work, the finale. Your right would be to have either the series the opportunity to re-download it, or it to be replaced, so that you can complete the TV series. So if you've purchased 13 episodes, you're entitled to have the 13 episodes, and you can raise a complaint if only 10 or 11 were successfully downloaded.
Okay. Do you find that maybe having a digital good you find that there's less complaints or less issues? Or I think I'd say they're probably the same, wouldn't you? This is just a personal question. Well,
with digital content, you have to be a lot more careful, because your options of just returning that digital content, let's say it was a TV series and it didn't live up to your expectation, or it wasn't how you imagined that would be, you wouldn't have the same rights as if looking at the latest computer, and whether that lived up to the expectation or the description given to it. So you have to be mindful on what you purchase, and certainly digital content these days. If you were to buy a computer game, for example, for your latest console, they're extremely expensive, £60 to £70. So it is something to be mindful of, that you wouldn't be necessarily entitled to a refund.
Okay. And apologies to go back, but this is just a question that's popped up in my head. You mentioned about the time limit that you have to either return a good or ask for some sort of replacement. It's 30 days, is that correct?
That's 30 days, usually is the position.
So from what I know, it's 30 days from when you become an owner of that gift. So obviously it's Christmas time and it's sales time and the year's coming to an end and we're going to have more January sales. For instance, if I bought a gift today and I gave it to you tomorrow and you open it tomorrow or a week later, all I'm trying to say basically is that ownership, has that now transferred to you, or is that obligation still on me?
So this is where you would often look to ensure that you have a gift receipt so that you can gift that receipt to to the person. The ownership remains with you.
With me, the buyer.
With you, the original buyer.
Okay.
Think of it as a contract law. The contract with the retailer was with you, not necessarily with me, even though I received the gift.
Okay.
So, yes, and that's something that shoppers should be mindful of, and, especially with gifts, that you give a gift receipt, because then it enables the retailer to, deal with that complaint, any complaints I have with me personally, as opposed to you.
Okay. And could you just provide us some more examples of what a service is? Because at the start, we made mention of goods that you can bring. The Consumer Rights Act protects not only something that's tangible, so again, like a service, if you've not received good service, if you've not received any good customer service, what other examples of services are there?
So there's... Services has such a wide meaning, and it really encompasses from, let's say, getting a repairman out to fix your plumbing, for example. It extends to getting a haircut. That would be a service where you would expect reasonable care and skill. Yeah. And that's the test there for services. Has that service been delivered to you with reasonable care and skill? So if I take the example of a hairdresser, I go in and get my hair cut, but the haircut is cut too short or not to the specification that I asked for it to be done. The issue there is that service hasn't been given to me as described, as I've requested it to be, or with the skill that was required. In a situation like that, a service is still being performed, but I would certainly be entitled to a partial refund.
Okay. I think that might cause some difficulties in the sense that obviously you stated at the beginning that it's what a reasonable person may seem as fit for purpose. So if someone now says, with the haircut example, the owner may say it's perfectly fine. I mean, I think that's where the dispute normally arises. Is that correct?
It is. But certainly with any service that you're receiving, it has to be the information led. So if I go in and I don't give any instructions to my hairdresser, then certainly you could argue that he cut it as he thought was reasonably suitable. Yeah. But with these sort of modern day services, you will go in, you will say, I want it short around my sides, long at the top. You'll give them a design brief of how you want your hair to end up. And certainly if it's, drastically completely short all over, then you're going to want a refund back, or certainly all of your money back. But again, if it all comes down to what is reasonable.
Okay. And moving on to unfair terms in a contract. I think it's short for UCTA, or we say UCTA for short. But what exactly is unfair contract terms?
So this is where where there will be hidden charges applied, or the small print, what we're usually looking at. So fees and charges in the small print, or where you purchase something and the terms and conditions are actually not given to you at the point of sale. It's given to you afterwards in a booklet that you may not have been given to at the time of purchase or even knew about, and it only arises after you return it. That would be an unfair contract term, and certainly any company wishing to rely on that will have to prove that it's not unfair and that this information was given to you at the very beginning.
And with having unfair contract terms, because again, I know I keep going back to digital, but this is something that, affects our lives because of the day and age that we're living in. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have bought something online, and before you can actually sign up to the website or purchase it, you have to click on the terms and conditions. Now, is it rare for unfair terms to be part of the T's and C's, or is it just something that, standard procedure?
With websites, as long as it's been advertised, it's available to you to read, you should take the time to read just the small print, the terms and conditions.
A lot of people don't.
No, they don't.
But we should, because it's there. Yeah,
we really should. But let's take, for example, insurance. Lots of people would have bought their car insurance over the telephone. Again, they will read out, and they will feel obligated to read out to you their terms and conditions, such as late payment cancellation, my rights to recancel it within 14 days. They will spell all those, and if they don't, what the consequences of that will be. And then it's up to me at that point whether I wish to subscribe and take out that service or not.
Okay, and just to add to that, normally with terms and conditions, your obligations, both obligations for each party, the buyer and the seller, it should be quite clear cut. So normally in T's and C's, you shouldn't really find any sort of fees or hidden charges or something that tries to limit your rights. If you do see any terms of that in the contract, then that's when you should seek legal advice, probably before purchasing, if you have such terms.
Certainly with the courts, if it went that far and they decide that a particular term is unfair, they will either seek to allow you to ignore that term or cancel your contract without, let's say, having to pay any cancellation fees or those hidden charges.
Okay. I think we're coming towards the end of our first half, but I'd just like to recap with Dean what we've discussed. So the topic of today is consumer rights and your, how you are protected. The reason for the topic of today, sales are coming out and loads of gifts are being brought at this time of the year, and people need to know what rights they have. I feel like a lot of us, including myself, we don't actually understand the rights that are given to us under the goods that we buy. We also may be a bit misinformed about what actually constitutes to good. So Dean, if you could just help me round up. So what provision protects us under this topic?
So for consumers, we're looking at the Consumer Rights Act 2015. And that's the new act, which is really encompasses it all now. And under that, what we're looking at is if we're buying goods, that those goods are of 1, satisfactory quality, 2, fit for purpose, and 3, as described.
Perfect.
And with that, we're also looking at services as well. And the Consumer Rights Act applies to services. And we described what a service is.
Yes.
These are non-tangible items such as getting your hair cut, seeking a repair man to come out to your property to do the plumbing or electrician. These would fall under the Consumer Rights Act. And under that, you're entitled to receive a service as described and with reasonable skill and care.
Okay. And briefly, what if someone is not happy with a product, what can they do?
So within the first 30 days, with goods, you can seek to get a refund back. After the 30-day period, you will have to show that the fault well, usually within the first 6 months, it's assumed that with a product that the fault was already there at the time of purchase. And there, after 30 days, you can either look to have it replaced or repaired by the retailer.
Perfect. And lastly, let's just quickly have a quick brief recap of unfair contract terms.
So unfair contract terms are terms that were hidden or weren't provided at the first opportunity. And they usually relate to the small print. If you weren't given that information at the beginning or didn't realise that you were contracting into these terms, which weren't made clear to you at the very beginning, you can look to either have those terms set aside, and certainly you would question whether those hidden charges or cancellation fees would apply.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dean, for that recap. And thank you to all our listeners that has joined us in the first half. But please do join us again. This is going to be a short break for the second half, where we'll be providing you, our listeners, with examples of using and applying the new consumer laws to purchasing of goods. Thank you.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
And welcome back to the Ask Your Lawyer show. My name is Esther Olasehinde of Liberty Law Solicitors, and I'll be hosting the show for today. On mic 3, joining me again for part 2, I have
Dean Garrett from Liberty Law Solicitors. Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Dean, so much for joining me. So the topic of today is consumer rights. Before the break, we were just discussing what exactly are goods, what constitutes a service, and the 3-stage test under the Consumer Rights Act. That is what governs and regulates the purchases of goods. We also discussed about unfair contract terms and what you can do if you're not happy with a product. So moving on to part 2, we're just basically going to have some sort of workshop, if that makes sense, where we'll give you guys examples, common examples, especially in this day and age, of applying the Consumer Rights Act to everyday issues. So, Dean, I don't know about you, but around this time of the year and also having birthdays and a New Year and Christmas, I get gift cards. So how does that play a part under the Consumer Rights Act? What rights do I have with all these gift cards that I'll hopefully get?
With gift cards, I'm glad you brought it out. It's actually separate to the Consumer Rights Act. It's still, everything applies underneath it. But with gift cards, you have to be cautious with them. Let's say with vouchers and your day experiences that you can buy from your common, experience websites. They usually have an expiry date.
Yes.
And once it's expired, that's part of the terms of the contract. It can no longer be used. And expiry, these gift cards are often purchased and they will have maybe 6 months to a year. Some retailers do now offer unlimited time limits, but it's always worth checking before buying a gift card or a voucher. What's the expiry date? And ensuring that the person who's receiving that gift knows that's the time limit.
Yeah. And then I'm glad you said about the expiry dates, because I think as of recent, I think we're all aware about TUI, that, the plane company that went bust, and a lot of people complaining that they had vouchers to use. How does that play a part? Because even my own personal opinion, some people may say it's not fair. What can they do now? Because that money that they spent is in a voucher.
So I'm going to give some practical tips probably on how to approach this in the future if you are looking to buy vouchers and gift cards. But if a company goes bust or goes under, you're really, these vouchers and gift cards are likely to be rendered useless. Oh, wow. Because when a company goes under, it will go into administrators and you essentially become a creditor, owed money. But if there's insufficient money in the pot, it's unlikely that you're going to receive anything back, or maybe only a percentage of what was purchased.
Exactly.
So, and that's really you really should be careful when buying the gift cards. They can be useful, if you don't know who to buy for, but certainly nothing beats having tangible cash because, it doesn't come with, let's say, for example, the same time limits or restrictions.
Yeah.
That's another thing to be careful about. With gift cards and with vouchers, they can include restrictions, such as only being able to be used at the weekend, for example, or not applicable on all goods or items. So it's useful to check that, these gift cards and vouchers aren't put to the same restrictions. Finally, I probably would add that you need to also be cautious about refunds when it comes to gift cards. Normally, when in a refund situation, if you purchase through your credit card, debit card, or cash, you would, within the first 30 days under the Consumer Rights Act, be entitled to a full refund. With gift cards, you are likely only to receive the store credit or another gift card replacing that. So you may spend £100 on a gift card, or you've really not happy with a service or goods that you've purchased from a retailer, and you do not want to go back, and the only recourse that you have is to have it put back on a gift card. And certainly I have to speak from personal I won't name the electrical shop retailer, but certainly I had this issue. I purchased a gift card, I went out to use it to buy an electrical item, and the item never got delivered. And this happened on numerous occasions. I cancelled the delivery, and I was told that I was only entitled to have a gift card back. So to avoid all that angst and, complaints I managed to get it resolved in the end. But to avoid that, you have to be cautious. Because certainly there'll be terms and conditions there that only enable to have a refund back on your card.
Okay. I'm glad you're giving all of these examples because, again, I don't think a lot of people may know. I mean, I certainly didn't know, but thank you for that, Dean. So moving forward, how about paying by credit card?
So this is the practical tips. When you're making a large purchase, and when I say large, we're referring to purchases between £100 to £30,000. You'll be covered by the credit card company under the Consumer Credit Card Act. Okay. And what that means is, and this is very useful, the credit card company actually becomes jointly and severally liable with the retailer who you've purchased it, because their items or services being purchased on a credit. So the credit card company shares that liability. So, for example, you buy goods and you realize, in actual fact, it never got delivered or it was a scam. Your credit card company will be liable as that person who scammed or didn't deliver the services or goods as promised. And you're really going to be able to get your money back because certainly you can take your complaint up against the credit card company. And it's really good protection there. With debit cards, that same protection isn't there, not to the same degree. You'll have something known as a chargeback scheme. And this is useful for items under £100, where it can be, the items that you're complaining about, goods or services under £100, can be charged back from the retailer or person you spent the service, the money with. But that doesn't always apply. And banks may not always be able to charge back that sum. But with credit cards, because the credit card company is liable with that retailer or the service provider, you have a recourse to go back to seek that money back.
Okay.
So it's a really, really top tip. If you're going to make a large purchase, again, under 30,000, I have to say, but if you are going to buy a holiday in advance, make sure you buy it on a credit card. It gives you that a bit more protection. More
protection than a debit card?
Yes.
Interesting. I didn't know that at all.
And that's a top tip, with recent, companies big household names going under, it's something to bear in mind. And with credit cards, people often have a negative view to them. But certainly if you're using that card diligently and you're making these sort of purchases, it can be a very smart choice.
Okay.
With the protection being offered to you.
Interesting. And next topic would be trains. Now, before you go on to trains, from what I have always known is if a train, and apologies if this is going off topic, but I just wanted to put this forward, it might relate. I think if your train is 15 minutes late, you're due for a refund. But I've had a friend who the train was 3 hours, the delays, cuts, services were bad, and their refund was 25p. So give us the rundown on trains and see if that can help us with that situation.
I'm glad you put the topic trains in, because I can imagine a lot of people travelling back home or from university to be with family. And it's really important to know what your rights are with trains.
Okay.
And what you're referring to is often called delay repay.
Okay.
And usually, yes, you're right. With any delay of at least 15 minutes to half an hour, you should be able to get a refund back. But there will be certain circumstances where that won't apply. And again, I have to put a caveat. Certain rail companies are generous. They have, a very good policy or a charter. It will usually be called a rail charter. They're pledged to you. And the delay repay terms and conditions on how they will refund or what they will deem the percentage of your refund really depends on the service provider you go with.
Okay.
So it's something really worth looking at, because these rail providers need to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And if their charters aren't favourable, complaints need to be raised. But certainly the general position is if it's 15 minutes to half an hour late, then you're entitled to some refund, partial or maybe even a full refund. And again, I've had it in circumstances where I've been delayed by half an hour and I've been given 25% back.
Okay.
So it really comes down to the delays. But it gets a bit more complicated. Because that's the delay repay. I urge everyone to if you're travelling on the same rail providers, have a look on their website, to look at what their charter pledges to you and understand the scheme. Because certainly if you're travelling, commuting every day into work or places, you should be seeking your refund if you are delayed. There will be, again, I said exceptions to this rule, such as, let's say, a full strike or engineering works.
Yeah.
And that may not be covered.
Okay.
But certainly if you are commuting and you have a season ticket or weekly or monthly ticket, when it comes to renewal, you should be entitled to a discount if the company hasn't actually lived up to what its performance should be. So if they've missed their performance targets, you should be challenging and certainly looking for a discount on your renewal. And that is key, because that's the only way you're going to hold these companies to account. And that's something that a power that I'm not sure many people are using or utilising, and making sure they are applying for that discount upon renewal. Where the Consumer Rights Act 2015 comes into for trains is you can still make, if that doesn't work out, you haven't been able to claim back or delay repay or get a discount renewal, you can look to bring a claim under the Consumer Rights Act, where again the test will be, because it's a service being provided, have they acted with reasonable care and skill? So let's say, for example, a breach of reasonable care and skill, they've messed up the timetabling, and as a result, the trains are severely overcrowded. Or because of the delays caused, for whatever reason, mismanagement, for example, you've missed a connecting journey. And as such, you've had to pay out additional sums to make a new journey or pay, then you'd be entitled to claim that money back. And certainly would have an actionable case. But where the Consumer Rights Act applies, while you can claim what we call as consequential losses, so losses arising from the rail company's breaches or failure to perform, it must be linked. You must be able to show that because of their failure to provide a good service, you've suffered a loss. But what I would urge is always, before going down the drastic route of going to, start court action, raise that complaint with the rail companies, and if no responses is given to you after 40 days, raise it with the rail ombudsman.
Yes.
Who we referred, there's many ombudsman services and ADRs, alternative dispute resolution schemes out there. And, this is something you should hold these rail companies particularly to account. And the rail ombudsman is a fantastic service to use.
And just to add to that and also ask a question, these resolutions, they're normally free, aren't they?
Yes, they'll be free.
Yeah.
And it will be timetabled managed as well. So, the rail ombudsman will give you what part of they'll investigate the problem, and they can order rail company to pay you back sums, compensation, and certainly if they are continuously receiving complaints, they can raise this further with national government over, over the service that it's providing.
If they're seeing like a reoccurring problem that's not being resolved.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And another service or goods that is relating to travel is flights. Like obviously this time of the year, people are traveling back home, maybe visiting family. So what can we say about flights?
So within the European Union, if your flight is going to be within the EU, you may be entitled to up to 600 euros.
Okay, compensation. If your flight has been delayed for more than 4 hours. Okay.
Outside of Europe, it really depends on the who you're flying with, okay, and what destination you're going to. But certainly within Europe itself, have a look at that. If your flight's been delayed by more than 4 hours, there's a compensation scheme that you can apply for, and you can get up to a maximum of 600 euros.
Okay.
If it's between 2 and 4 hours, what you're entitled to really depends on the distance you've got to travel, the flight time. So whether it's a short haul or a long haul. So if it's between 2 to 4 hours, you should be entitled, let's say if it's more than a 2-hour delay, to a free phone call, at least 2 free phone calls, email or fax. If it's longer than 4 hours, more than 2 to 4 hours, you certainly would be looking at maybe a free meal, or something as appropriate to the delay. Okay. If it's an overnight, a longer delay than 4 hours, in addition to the compensation, you would be probably looking at hotel accommodation if you're having to stay overnight. Yeah. And again, that will be something that the airline companies will have in place. And certainly it's something that you need to raise at that time. You should also be able to claim as well out-of-pocket expenses. Okay. But you will have to show and demonstrate that those out-of-pocket expenses occurred because of the airline has failed in some way.
Yeah.
So if you missed a day of your holiday, for example, and it's through the airline's fault, then certainly you should be able to claim the reasonable cost for that lost day of accommodation you had, or if you had bought an excursion trip and you've missed that as a result, you should be able to claim back the reasonable cost for that excursion that you've paid out. Again, with everything, there's exceptions to this. Yes. And a rail company will not, airline company will not have to pay out-of-pocket expenses, for example, if they can show that the reasons for the delay was because of extraordinary circumstances, something outside of their control. Yeah. But I would add that airline strikes, so we had recently Ryanair and a few of the other budget airline pilots going on strike, that wouldn't be considered out of the ordinary. Yeah. And certainly under that, you would be entitled to receiving compensation. And certainly if you've suffered out-of-pocket losses, you should be seeking to claim that back.
Okay. And apologies to make you go back, but you gave examples of to what people could be entitled to if there's a delay between 2 and 4 hours. And you mentioned 2 free phone calls and emails. What does that mean? Does that mean to contact people back in your home country, or?
Yes, if you need to, for example, contact a hotel that you're travelling to, or if you've got people waiting for you at the receiving airline, you should be able to. They should provide a service to allow you to communicate, and whether that's by phone calls or by emails. And they should actually, there's the minimum standard that they should give if it's a delay between 2 to 4 hours is at least 2 phone calls and the opportunity to at least send 2 emails or faxes if you still use fax.
Okay. And so moving forward, we're now going to go to...
Well, the only thing I would just add on the flights, once you've raised your complaint with the airline, again, if you're running into difficulties or the airline's not being cooperative, most airlines are compelled to join a ADR scheme, alternative dispute resolution scheme. And what I would urge is that you contact the Civil Aviation Authority if you are having difficulties with your airline, and they will put you in touch with which approved scheme that airline is affiliated to. And certainly they have a wealth of information on what compensation you're entitled to, the Civil Aviation Authority. And I urge, again, they've got a helpline, contact them.
And are they independent?
They are independent.
Independent and partial, perfect. So we're now going to move on, unless, Dean, you have any other contribution, because we're going to go into examples now, everyday examples. Do you have any other?
No.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll move on to the examples of using the new consumer laws. So example number 1. So say I think Dean used this example before regarding the mobility scooter, but we'll go back into that again. So you've bought a mobility scooter. It's frequently used over the course of 5 months. By the end of this time, you notice that the battery is not performing properly or retaining its charge for long. The trader performs a repair, but the scooter continues to perform poorly. So you choose to reject it and get a refund. How is this act protected? How is that the goods and the purchase of the goods protected under this act?
So under the act, as it's under 6 months, and you haven't had a reasonable, you expect a scooter to last longer, you're entitled to ask for a full refund. But if it's over 6 months, this is where it gets a bit different. The trader is entitled to you're entitled to ask for it to be repaired or replaced. If you do not want it repaired or replaced, you're entitled to ask for your refund. But the trader is entitled to reduce that amount of refund because you've had over 6 months use out of it. And in applying why this is the case, we have to look at it's a goods, so it has to be of satisfactory quality. And in this example, the scooter isn't of satisfactory quality because the battery is not performing as it should. Certainly, if you were looking at the description and it was said, good battery life, you again would say it's not lived up to its description. And certainly, if it's not fit for its purpose. And that's why you would be entitled to it.
Okay. And that was quite not an extreme example, but it was an example of faulty goods that I would say not high end, but it's something that, a customer shouldn't expect to,
a mobility scooter certainly would be, it's quite expensive, at least 50, a couple £1,000 I can imagine some go for. So, as things go, that gives you a perfect example. Again, we can apply this to your car, for example, any car you buy. Within the first 6 months, if it's not upfit to not performing, it's constantly breaking down or it has issues, you should be entitled to a refund.
Okay.
Over 6 months, the burden starts to move away and it may fall to you that the fault wasn't there in the beginning. And it can get more challenging. And certainly at that point, if a repair or replacement isn't good enough, a dealer may look to reduce how much of a refund you get back.
Okay.
But again, with car dealerships, a lot of them do subscribe to alternative dispute resolution scheme providers. So you should always look at that as a first course before going down any court route.
Okay. And on the lower end of the spectrum, so something maybe not as expensive as a mobility scooter or car, how about a toaster? So you've bought a toaster, but then you find a week later that when you try to use it for the first time, that it won't turn on or the bread won't stay down. So applying the 3 steps? So
in this circumstances, you've probably purchased this toaster for this description that it will toast your bread. For its purpose, it should be able to remain down and toast it, and it should be of satisfactory quality. You should have a toasted bread, not something that's continuously burnt or not cooked at all. So for that reason, it certainly would fall under the Consumer Rights Act. And because it's under 30 days, you've only owned it for a week, you're entitled to now simply reject that good and ask for a full refund.
Okay. Now, we've talked about faulty goods. Let's go on to some examples with digital content. So say if someone has downloaded a free game and to build up some sort of virtual reality, or they've built up some sort of virtual currency in the game through normal gameplay, and then that person buys some additional virtual currency in order to make an in-app purchase. I know that happens a lot on computer games or even phones, I believe, nowadays. How is that item now protected?
So this is a little bit more complicated. As the app, let's say it's a free game, the game itself, if it stopped working the very next day after downloading, because it's free, you wouldn't be entitled to a remedy. But if you had purchased a lot of currency to, unlock new levels or buy new content within the game, you would be entitled to for that to be repaired or fixed, or certainly refunded.
Yeah. Okay.
If you've spent money and you're unable to use it in that game because it develops a fault.
Okay, so that's an example on digital content, because we're running out of time, but I would like to give more examples.
I think with that example you just gave, it's just worth bearing in mind that the retailer or the seller who sold you that digital content, they are only liable for the parts that cost that they have charged for.
Okay.
Any free content doesn't apply.
Okay. Thanks for adding that on. So moving on to services. So services not carried out with reasonable care and skill. So an example, you contract with a catering service to provide a buffet for you on your birthday for 6 p.m. on any given Saturday. You pay £25 per head for the service. There is a clause in the contract stating that the maximum discount for any service problem caused by the supplier is £70. However, the buffet is delivered late and at 10 p.m. So that's a big 4-hour difference as the party's ending. So what can that person now do? They've ordered for food and it's not come.
Well, the contract here is you're going to receive the buffet by 6 p.m. The term here, restricting your ability to seek a refund, would be an invalid clause. The reason being is we're not talking here an hour delay at 7 p.m. Where the party would still be okay. We're talking at the very end of the party where there is no way to remedy that situation. There's only one party, and the buffet is a crucial part of that birthday party to feed your guests.
Yeah.
Delivering it at the very end of the party has ruined the experience. So a term like that would not be valid. And certainly the Consumer Rights Act, again, would apply because they haven't performed their skills as caterers in providing that food with reasonable care or skill.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that answering that example. I believe we're actually coming towards the end of the show, so no more examples, unfortunately. But we would just give that little bit of advice that if you do have any issues, don't hesitate to go back to the seller. And if any other issues, go to Citizens Advice. Ask for if there's any consumer helplines to help you with this problem, because your rights are protected. So thank you so much, Dean, for joining us.
No problem at all.
This is the Ask Your Lawyer show, and please join us back for our next episode. Have a lovely evening, and thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We stream our daily broadcast on inspirefm.org. You'll find all our daily updates on our social media at InspireFM Luton.